Transform your business with Microsoft Azure, the one-stop shop for everything cloud and AI. With Azure Migrate and Modernize, move your existing workloads to Azure with ease. With Azure Innovate, build new solutions with focused and deep engagement. Their core offerings provide comprehensive resources, expert assistance, and cost optimization tools. Accelerate your cloud journey and stay ahead of the competition with Microsoft Azure. Visit aka.ms/Azure Hero Offerings to learn more. That's aka.ms/Azure Hero Offerings to learn more.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it is Aaron for a quick introduction this week. Just wanted to let everyone know we have a fantastic interview this week. We are talking to Gene Kim, author of Wiring the Winning Organization. He has a new book out. But our relationship with him goes back to Phoenix Project days, and gosh, it's been 10, 11 years. And also the Unicorn Project as well. So really looking forward to digging into his new book. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the interview, but it is a little bit long. So we are going to jump right in right after the break.
Are you getting pressure from finance to justify or reduce your cloud bill? CloudZero is the only cloud cost platform loved by engineers and trusted by finance. CloudZero can identify unused, idle, or over-provisioned resources, alert you to spend anomalies, and organize 100% of your spend into a framework that mirrors your business structure, like cost per customer, product feature, or team. It's the most powerful platform ever built to provide accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Manage cost, optimize development, and maximize profit, all in one platform. Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Visit today to experience immediate and ongoing savings on your cloud bill. And we're back. And folks, you know, we're very, very lucky on this show to get a chance to talk to a lot of very interesting people, a lot of very smart people, a lot of people that in one way or another have made an impact on this industry, especially the technology industry. But every once in a while, and it's not often enough, and we need to sort of rectify that, we get a chance to talk to people who have made an impact way beyond the impact that Aaron and I have, and have just become sort of legendary figures in our industry. And today we get a chance to do that. And so I am super excited to have good friend, longtime, friend of the show, but also friend and somebody I've traveled with, Gene Kim, who most of you know from author of the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project. But Gene, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you back on. It's been way too long.
Oh my gosh, Brian, it has been, it has been way too long. It was just so great catching up with you beforehand. We have to do this so much more often. In fact, after we get done with this, let's get something on the calendar so we know when the next time that we'll be able to hang out is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, as I mentioned in the intro, you are world renowned in our industry, in the DevOps industry, for a lot of the work that you've done before, Phoenix Project, Unicorn Project, DevOps Handbook, all those links are in the show notes. But you are now just coming out with another new book along with Stephen Spear, who is not joining us today, but your new co-author. Give us an update on how did this come about? How did you and Stephen come together? Kind of give us the overview about winning, wiring the winning organization.
Yeah, fantastic. In fact, our conversation beforehand has sort of put me in this kind of like a very contemplative mood. Yeah, so let me, I'll tell you what most people might know, and then I'd love to give you a little bit more detail on like why it was so impactful to me. So, many people know I've been studying high-performing technology organizations for 25 years now, and so that was a journey that started back when I was a CTO and founder of a company called Tripwire in the information security space. And so, in that 25-year journey, I had sort of stumbled into the middle of the DevOps movement, which was so exciting. I mean, I think so genuinely transformative to the way software organizations work. And that's what the Phoenix Project came out in 2013. The DevOps Handbook came out in 2016. Accelerate came out in 2018. And the Unicorn Project came out in 2019. And so the quest I've been on for the last 3 years was been on this quest with Dr. Stephen Spear from the MIT Sloan School of Business. And, he is famous for many things, but among the things he's famous for is he was part of the second generation of researchers studying Toyota. And so in 1999, he wrote this seminal work called Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. I think it's the most widely downloaded Harvard Business Review article of all time.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually based on his doctoral dissertation he did at the Harvard Business School, where he actually worked on the plant floor of a tier 1 Toyota supplier for 6 months. And so it's this epic, deep immersion into, truly understanding and really decoding kind of, how and why does the Toyota production system work in the way they do. And so I met him in 2014 when I took a workshop from him at MIT. And, it actually was probably responsible for at least a year delay in the DevOps handbook, because I just learned so much that I had never seen or contemplated before. And I felt like it was important to get in that book. And so the question we set out to ask was, what is in common between, DevOps and Agile in the software world, and, Toyota production system, lean in the manufacturing world, and safety culture and resilience engineering, that he's had experience with at Alcoa and in the U.S. Navy nuclear reactor operations. And our conclusion was that they were all, incomplete expressions of a far greater but simpler whole. That's what we try to get into the book. And as I was mentioning to you beforehand, for me, it was this 3-year. It was the most intellectually challenging thing I've ever worked on, but it was the most rewarding because it really forced me to deeply understand the underpinning theory of how these mechanisms work, and why does DevOps work in the way it does, and why is waterfall not so great? And it was just this again, the most intellectually challenging thing I've ever worked on. And maybe just one more thing, Brian,
Sure.
like many people say, right, is like DevOps was so much inspired by lean manufacturing, and I thought I understood that 14 years ago. And yet, I think over the last 3 years, it really made me realize just how much I didn't know. And it was just such an incredible adventure, trying to deeply understand, why do people say that, and to what extent is that true? And it really led to the ability to sort of clinically write down kind of like, okay, what are the components that make up the Toyota production system? What part cause organizations to be great, and to what extent have we borrowed those concepts, and where does it show up, et cetera. So it was super rewarding.
Excellent. Good to hear. And folks, we're going to put some stuff, links in the show notes. One of the things that Gene and his organization do is not only are you kind of writing the book, putting it out there for people, but you guys do a number of great with workshops and webinars and things where people dive into it. There's community built around that. So as you're clicking on the link, and again, I finished the book a few days ago. I've had it kind of over the holidays. Can't recommend it highly enough. Go check out some of the other stuff that they do as well around the book, because it's not just a one-time thing. It's like a lot of the things that you do around DevOps Enterprise Summit and other things. It's really a community effort to learn together and bring ideas together.
Awesome.
So I want to ask, and again, book reviews are always sort of hard on podcasts, because if the audience hasn't read the book, they're kind of vicariously living through the little bits and pieces that we do in 30 minutes. The first thing that jumped out at me was when I read Phoenix Project and Unicorn Project, they were very much told from, at the time, what felt like, I'll call it sort of bottom up. It was people who had to live with the problem in the organization, and them going, how do we fix this, right? Like, we can't just expect that management will fix it. Like, we're going to try and take the reins and try and fix it. And so the perspective seemed very much aspirational, right? Like, you could put yourself in the shoes of the hero, of the protagonist trying to solve a problem. This one felt a little bit different in that, to a certain extent, you and Stephen are sort of the center of it, just as examples, but it felt a little more like less kind of aspirational in a storytelling perspective, but it felt much more prescriptive in terms of being like, okay, here's scenarios, here's situations, here's scenarios, and here's how you apply these things, right? So it was, felt much more, I don't know exactly what the right word is. The thing that jumped out at me was when I read the other books, I was at a certain place in my career, and I was more kind of day-to-day hands-on with things and trying to solve individual. This felt like maybe it was a higher level, like if you're a mid-level manager or a higher level manager, and you've got to solve what seem like complex problems that are as much organizational as they are cultural.
Yeah.
Was there any thought process to being like, what's the point of view of the book, or did the topic just sort of lend itself to being like, we kind of have to tell it from this perspective?
That is such an interesting insight. Yeah, and so for me, I came from a place of incredible frustration because in some ways an indictment of some of the top leaders of organizations. In fact, there was a story in the book that really resonated with me. I mean, it was one of the most astounding things I've ever heard. As a friend of mine, he told me, I'm in a large mobile telco. And one of the top initiatives for the year is to get a checkbox in front of our, say 20, 30 million customers so that they can opt into a $5 a month service, so they can get email, watch movies, etc. The problem is that it will take, it's estimated to take $28 million because it has to cross 40 different teams. It requires, CEO -1 level support, daily war room meetings, and a year. And the astounding thing is that most people say give it a 20% chance of success because it didn't work the last 2 times. Right. And so I mean, this is like what's so interesting is that this is not, the difficulty is not in the this is not like the Apollo space program where there were engineering problems that never had been solved before.
Right.
This is a way to characterize this problem is that the entirety of the effort is in coordination. Is how do you get 40 different silos to work together towards a common purpose? It just it really spoke to me, and apparently in the book there's 25 case studies. 20% are technology related, probably a third are healthcare related, because there's so many of there's. One of the places this is most visible is in the modern healthcare system, in modern hospitals. And one of the big revelations for me was that, the hospitals were so much easier to manage in the 1950s. I learned this from Steve. So basically, one of the reasons is that there were basically 2 silos, doctors and nurses. There was no technology. And so you didn't have, this whole layer of management for, say, MRI machines, CAT scans, radiology, et cetera. So these days, right, 70 years later, we have scores of functional specialties just in the clinicians. You have nurses, pharmacy, supply chain, right? You have technology. Right. You have, radiology is actually being renamed to imaging because not just X-rays, it's CAT scans, MRI machines, and so forth. So, like, imagine this organizational circuitry that has to be in place in a modern hospital system versus the 1950s. And what I learned was that, as you increase the number of functional silos, the sophistication of this organizational circuitry, the social circuitry, has to get far more sophisticated, right, to coordinate all of their efforts. And so, you look in technology, right? I guess you don't have to go that far back where you didn't have DevOps. You had just the technology teams. Right. Now it's not just DevOps, it's InfoSec, it's legal, it's quote the business. Then you have now these generative AI, ML folks showing up, and it helps me understand like why technology is so much more difficult to manage than it was, say, 20 years ago. So it's a source of marvel and a source of wonder, and really the book is really intended to try to show that these problems exist. They span every industry vertical. They span every domain. It's engineering, design, operations, air combat.
Yeah.
And there's a common forces at work.
Yeah. No, it definitely felt like a book that I felt like if I had taken a copy of DevOps Handbook or Phoenix Project, I could have given it to other probably technical people and they would have gotten it and it felt like it applied to them. This one felt like a book that I could probably walk into any MBA program and give to. I could give to sort of, a leader that doesn't necessarily have to deal with technology. It felt much, much broader than just being narrow. But I think, and it sort of overlaps with what you just said, which is like there is no longer just a technology silo. Technology kind of overlaps every aspect of business and sort of vice versa, right? It's the thing I always say, like there are no business decisions anymore that don't involve some sort of technology adjacent decision that goes along with it. So the two are sort of intrinsically linked at this point.
That's right. And just to riff off of that, it doesn't mean that technology goes away. It means that the nature of its integration into all aspects of strategy and operations has to be far more seamless. And it and the job of the technology leader becomes all the more important because imagine a world where any business unit, any marketing group, any sales group can hire whatever technologists they want. And I'm not saying that any of us do that, but one can imagine they might make poor choices, right? And so we see, when you have these functional specialties, right, they become responsible for, hiring, creating standards, right, making sure that they have, the skills are up to date, so that they can be deployed, into these different missions across the organization. And I was just reading the Steve Yeggie's depiction of the Jeff Bezos memo of the API application of Amazon, and there was something that just leaped out at me yesterday. And he said, he was comparing his experience at Google, right? And he was saying, compared to Google, Amazon's hiring practices are terrible, right? Every group can hire for themselves. They don't have a uniform set of standards, right? So there's a great variance in skills across Amazon. I mean, it was so interesting. This is usually where kind of the functional specialty, this is where they have such great power to create value for the organization because they are the experts, right? And it liberates, the other groups from having to worry about, is this doctor actually competent? Are they, will they actually help the patient? Do they expose us to enormous amounts of liability, right? This is not something that you want. This is really great when you sort of centralize that function.
Exactly. Well, and it's the classic example of, do I hire for expertise or do I hire for consistency? And there's trade-off in between them. At the core of the book, and again, it's impossible for us to summarize, anything that's multiple hundred pages in 30 minutes. But at the core of the book, there's sort of three concepts. There's slowification, there's amplification. Slowification, simplification, and amplification. Right. So where's the problem? How do we make sense of how do we make space for solving the problem? And then how do we solve the problem? Walk us through a little bit of those concepts and maybe give us an example of how they apply or, how the concepts fit together.
Yeah, for sure. If I can just maybe back up one step. And I think there's really, I think, two big aha moments for me working on this book with Steve. One, we're saying that, there's kind of three layers where people work in the organization. So layer one is the work, the object in front of us. So that could be the patient. It could be the code that we're working on. It could be the binary artifact that's running in production. The layer two is the technologies and tools that we use to do our work. So it could be the IDE. It could be, the OpenShift platform. It could be the MRI machine. And then layer three is the social circuitry, the organizational wiring of how we assemble, the components of our greater system. And, in the ideal, the leader is entirely responsible for creating that layer of social circuitry. So when an organization is stuck, like in that telco example I gave you, where, even small things require superheroic efforts, that is a failure of the design of layer three. And so I love this Winston Churchill quote, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. So too, when we are in organizations, right, we shape its organizational wiring forever after it shapes us. And so when we are in situations where, the system is not allowing everyone to do their best work that fully liberate people's creativity and problem solving capabilities, right, that is a failure of layer three. And so when you're asking what feels different about the book, one of them is that it's really meant to be an indictment to say, all right, if you are in an organization where you are stuck or where you are forced to do work in when work's not possible to do easily and well, right, that is the responsibility of leaders. And the second thing that I just found kind of revelatory is that, is that really the job of leaders? And the argument goes like this, is that, you don't have to have a very large project where the job of the leader is not a direct contribution in terms of labor, thinking, problem solving, right? And so if that's not where the contribution is, then it absolutely has to be about enabling others to do their work easily and well. So, what a revelation. So it just sort of isolates, what is the job of leadership, right? And so Dr. Ron Westrom said, there's kind of 5 great characteristics of the socio-technical maestro: high energy, high standards, great in the large, great in the small, but they love walking the floor. And, that just spoke to me. And I think it also so motivates, this notion that, leaders, we can create processes and organizations where people are able to do what they need. They can get what they need, and they get it when they need it, in the right format at the right time, and they can get it ideally at self-service on demand.
Right.
And the opposite of that is no one has what they need when they need it, and when they do, it's in the wrong format at the wrong time, and they have to talk to everybody to get it. And so that's not so good. So we say there's really kind of 3 mechanisms to go from what we were calling kind of this danger zone to the kind of winning zone. Danger zone is, problems are tough to solve because we're solving them in highly consequential environments, like during production, where small mistakes can have enormous consequences. So you can't undo, and we can't undo means you can't learn. So we have to reshape this social circuitry so that those problems are not being solved in production, but we're doing them in planning and practice. And we have to simplify them so that we are partitioning the problems so that they're smaller. And when we are solving small problems stay small. They don't ripple out and cascade out through this highly coupled system. Right. We have to sort of amplify these weak signals of failure, so that even the weakest signals of failure or requests for help are amplified, so that we can decisively act upon them to detect and correct, as well as prevent them from happening. And so really the 3, as you were saying, the 3 mechanisms are slowification. So move the most difficult problems from production into planning and practice. Simplification is like modularization or linearization, where we're making the problem smaller, like Amazon did with microservices, or the assembly line or Toyota production system did for sequential processes. And then amplification is, all right, how do you create the circuitry so that signals are amplified versus suppressed or extinguished entirely? How am I doing here so far, Brian?
No, it's good. It's good, and it's I'll say this much from just me having read through the book. The thing that jumped out to me, and again, like I struggle sometimes the first couple of times when I read or I learn things that are kind of have a framework to them, like, okay, I got to match that word to this task, this whatever. But the one thing that did jump out at me was, as I was reading it, and some of the examples you used, and it's nice because they start fairly straightforward and simple, and there's a whole series of examples of you guys like working on like improving a building or a hotel, or
moving a couch,
moving a couch, and but what jumped out at me was, as I was reading it and I was thinking about not the example that was used, but going, okay, in my own day-to-day work, in the company that I work in and my day job and all that sort of stuff, like how many times do I run into a situation in which the thing that we're trying to do by itself doesn't seem that complicated, but the task of actually doing it, the way that we do it, ends up being really complicated, meaning like it always involves 3 or 4 teams, and there's like 10 meetings that seem like they could just be solved with one meeting. And it really dawned on me that there is an art there is an art and a science to how you design or how you frame a problem, and then how you frame kind of the teams that go work on that. Do you need a meeting there? Do you need another group involvement there, or could you put those 2 things together, right? So my guess is sometimes it's simplify and make them small, and then sometimes it's like don't create 2 or 3 when it could be done as 1, or so that part jumped out at me as like, I'm going to use this immediately. Like it didn't feel like theory, which was really nice, which was really useful.
Can I do a bit of performance art around the couch metaphor and maybe describe why your comment means so much to me? Yeah, so of all the examples and case studies, the one I'm most proud of is the couch metaphor. And here's how the story goes. So imagine you have 2 people trying to move a couch, and let's call them Steve and Jean. And so you might dismiss moving a couch as all brawn work, no brain work allowed. And yet there are actually some important problems they need to solve. they have to find out where's the center of gravity, to get through a narrow doorway, around which axis do you rotate, to get through a narrow winding set of stairs, right? Who goes first? Do they go forwards or backwards? And they don't need consultants. They don't need focus groups. By picking up the couch, getting fast feedback, experimenting, communicating, coordinating, right, that we can get some assurance. We're pretty sure that they'll be able to solve the problem. But as leaders, there are all these things that we can do to actually make their jobs much more difficult and maybe even impossible. So the first thing we can do is turn off all the lights, right? So the job becomes more dangerous. It will take longer. They can damage the couch or maybe worse themselves. But we can also do something like, introduce a lot of background noise, like a loud siren or music. And so this is actually a different dimension of difficulty introduced, because it prevents Steve and Jean from communicating and coordinating. And so as leaders, we can also introduce an intermediary that prevents Steve and Jean from talking to each other directly. So instead, they have to go through like Jira work tickets or work orders, have account managers involved, maybe lawyers. And so under those conditions, I can imagine that Steve and Jean will not successfully move the couch, because they're no longer able to work on the problem together. So this is really a metaphor for joint cognition, joint problem solving. And so the Dev and Ops story is really exactly that, right? You had two independent silos that were that found it impossible to solve the problem together. And so I find this metaphor to has such explanatory power.
Yep.
So the whole API-ification of Amazon in the early 2000s, that was essentially 3,500 software engineers all coupled to one couch. And just like that telco example, right, none of them had independence of action. So every small thing required to, communicating, coordinating, escalating up 8 levels of management, because the digital teams, their customers still required to put a physical shipping address on each order, right? Which is they didn't budget for that. They had to work with 60 different ordering teams, right? And so they've created, tens, hundreds, and later thousands of microservices, so that they could enable independence of action. And what I find so marvelous is that, last year there was this kind of famous blog post where Amazon Prime Video described how they went from microservices back to a monolith. And it was as if they chopped up the couch into too many small pieces, because their work was dominated by coordination and transport, just copying these, video files in and out of storage buckets all the time. And so they glued the couch back together again, right? Re-establishing, coupling and, more important, coherence. I think almost every problem can be boiled down to to what you talked about. Is it have we divided up the couch incorrectly, right? And is there a better way to configure it? Sometimes you want couches, right? When we want tight coupling between people, and sometimes we want chairs where you want independence of action, right? And if you make the wrong decision, right, there are very predictable ways of how it manifests itself into problems in layer 3.
Yeah, and I think the thing that jumped out at me was. And again, this is different opinion or different viewpoint. Is I think when I was reading some of the DevOps things early on, it was this is this is the way to do it. It was like we're going to explain to you a new way of doing things, and it was framed in the perspective of like this is the way of doing it. And I think to me the difference that to me felt really important was I think we've all learned over time. Having experimented or failed or been successful or whatever, like in some cases, microservices and breaking things down into small parts makes sense. In other cases, the expectation may not have met the reality for various reasons, skill sets, problem sets, whatever it might have been. And what I really liked about the book was because at least in the early part of the book, the examples were things that were simple enough that you weren't like, okay, this is overwhelming to think about. But they were explained in such a way that, like you said, we're just going to use this couch metaphor, but we're going to talk about kind of the different things that could, make it successful, and then the things that could make it unsuccessful. And it allowed you to go, okay, how would this relate to me? Like, how would I, where is a couch in my day-to-day job? Okay, now am I turning the lights on? Do I have too much noise? Did I put marbles on the floor accidentally for these people? Like, all these sort of things. Like, did I not realize that the door isn't the same size as what I expect? All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that to me was really, really powerful. So, you've like I mentioned at the beginning, you inspired a whole generation of IT professionals and IT leaders with some of the early books. Have you gotten any feedback yet? I mean, the book's, it's only kind of been out in the marketplace for 3 or 4 months now, maybe less than that. Any initial feedback that's, beyond just sort of, gratitude, stuff that maybe you didn't expect, or just sort of insight that you've been surprised by so far?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm so gratified by is just the feedback, the positive feedback coming not just from technologists, but other domains, like whether it's from military services, from people doing drug design. And I think that was definitely one of the design objectives of the book. And for any authors out there, right, and for people designing products, I think that is really kind of one of the most important decisions you make in any writing project, in any sort of product design effort, is like, who is your audience? Yep. And one of the things that we was evident, right, given the collaboration between Dr. Steven Spear and myself, who come from different domains and industries, is that this is not a book for manufacturing or pharmaceutical leaders. It's not a book just for software leaders, right? It's for their bosses. And one of the things that I was so pleased and proud of and grateful for, and grateful for so many things, but also grateful for the foreword that was written by Admiral John Richardson. So he was formerly the chief of naval operations for the U.S. Navy. So he's comprehensively responsible for 600,000 sailors and civilians. So that incredible enterprise. He's on the board of Boeing, Exelon, and many others. And the foreword was just fantastic because it was just described in his own journey as a leader, how it resonated with him. And so as a leader of leaders, I think we were really hoping that the book would resonate with the people that he interacts with. And so, I think one of my fondest aspirations for the book is that it helps create a common context for the technology leader and their business counterparts. Because I think sometimes, technology problems get over delegated to the technology leader when it's it would be a drastic oversimplification to think that all technology problems can be solved just by the technology teams alone, right? These are business problems. How the business counterparts organize technology, where it fits in, right? Those have drastic implications of, the organizational wiring of, and it affects, to what extent can technology help achieve the business goals that it's entrusted with. So, to get that sort of feedback from, hey, this is helping me advance my goals in other parts of the organization, it's just been so gratifying to me. And I'm just so delighted by the fact that it also those sort of same concepts are resonating with you as well.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. It was it's one of those things. Sometimes you've been around for a little bit. You read some books. You maybe sometimes get a little like, okay, I feel like I've read this one before. This one lit up some parts of my brain that hadn't been lit up in a while. So I'm thankful for that. I appreciate that.
Can I mention one thing? So vignette number 1 was Steve and Jean moving a couch, and vignette number 2 was Steve and Jean helping renovate an old hotel. And essentially, it was in order to do that, you had to have 3 sequential interdependent steps: take all the furniture out, paint the room, and bring the furniture back in. And now we have 2 functional silos: movers and painters. And so it really is a depiction of, given this, somewhat simple problem, given, say, 25, 50 rooms, right? If you organize the silos in one way, right, and integrate them through scheduling, you can thoroughly screw up the system, right? And if you organize them into room teams that can work independently of each other, you can get far better outcomes and enable independence of action, not just between the room teams, but between the movers and painters within each room. And I just love that because it shows, if you can screw up such a simple system, imagine how badly you can screw up a system that, it has more functional silos, that operates faster, with higher consequentiality, with, faster tempo of operations. And those 2 examples, I think allow us to define these terms. That's like in physics, you can, the 3 laws of motion, or, being able to model, momentum and so forth through a pendulum. You don't need many more concepts to explain, sending a probe, through interstellar space. And it's our assertion and our belief that, just given those 2 vignettes and some concepts, you can actually explain the behavior of far more complex organizations. And so I just find that so satisfying that here's a parsimonious theory that can explain. I love that. The goal of science: explain the most with the least.
Yeah. No, it's awesome stuff. I'm sitting here thinking about it. I've been, as I have, teenage kids, and the way that they're learning these days, tends to be less, deep in textbooks, and they're learning via TikTok and YouTube and all these other sort of things that are short. And I'm kind of thinking about it, and I'm like, boy, if you could get paired up with a good animator, you could take a lot of those early vignettes in the book, turn them into like TikTok types of learnings in 5 minutes. You probably build a whole new set of followers that become the next generation of Phoenix Project followers that you had before. So, but yeah. Anyways, Gene, I'm going to wrap it up. I know you are super busy with a lot of commitments to this. Thank you as always for the time. It's great to catch up. Like we mentioned, you and I need to do this more often, and maybe we'll record it and maybe we won't. But I always love having a chance to talk to you, because you bring not only so much knowledge, but just so much passion about what you're working on. And I know these books are hard and they take a long time, but the passion you bring to them is really, really appreciated. So thank you for that. If folks want to dive into this, what are the best ways that you guys are working on, not only book distribution, but all the things that surround it?
Yeah. I think the best ways to reach me are probably LinkedIn and Twitter. So I'm at RealGeneKim on Twitter /X, and just find me on LinkedIn as under Gene Kim.
Okay. Well, very good. And we'll put all the links to all the things that you guys work on with IT Revolution and DevOps Enterprise Summit, and obviously the new book and everything. So congratulations again on getting it out. I know it is a journey and a lot of work. So
Sounds good. And by the way, congratulations to you on all your successes. And by the way, I loved your episode with Mark Hinkle. It's like, what a great time to be a technologist. It's just so much fun to be had in this space right now.
Absolutely. Well, folks, with that, on behalf of Aaron and I, we want to thank Gene again for his time. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for just helping us grow the podcast and, taking your feedback about what you'd like to hear. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.